All right, so we're going to look at lesson 3.8 today. Now you should have already gone over the worksheets in class and graded those. Make sure you're correcting in red. That's what I'm going to be looking for as far as the grading of these. If you don't understand something, you need to be asking the teacher or again, calling me at home until 7 o'clock. This section covers slopes of parallel and perpendicular lines. You've already found slope. Slope is the difference of rise over run. So the difference in the y values over the difference in the x values. You already know how to write an equation. If you have the intercept, you plug it into y equals mx plus b. If you don't have the y-intercept, you can use point slope form and plug it into that equation. You need to make sure you know both those equations. Let's start with a fact, which says two non-vertical, actually let's change that to if two non-vertical lines are parallel. If two non-vertical lines are parallel, then their slopes are equal. This is very important, so make sure, just like if I was here, you were writing all the notes down. Very important. By the way, we should also mention here that two vertical lines are also parallel. The non-vertical part comes from the actual fact. If they're vertical, they're both going to be going straight up and down, so they have to be parallel. But they don't have a slope. Remember, vertical lines have an undefined slope, so that's why we can't use that here. So let's look at an example of what we're going to be doing with this. Don't make this difficult, it really isn't. Let's say we're going to start with are the lines parallel? That's our question. And I'm going to draw two lines. Let's say this one is at -6, 1, and at 0, -2. Let's say we have another line that is at 0, 3, and 4, 1. Now don't say, oh, they look parallel, so they must be. That's not necessarily the case. You need to show it. What does the rule say? The rule says if the slopes are equal, the lines are parallel. So let's call this L1, let's call this L2 for line 1 and line 2. I hope you caught that. Let's find the slope of line 1. The slope of line 1, we're going to do the y values, 1 minus a -2, over -6 minus 0, which will give us 3 over -6, which is -1/2. There's our slope for our first line. Now let's look at the slope of the second line. Well, we've got 3 minus 1 over 0 minus 4. 3 minus 1 will give us 2. 0 minus 4 will give us -4. Oh, but this will also give us -1/2. So, are these two lines parallel? L1 is parallel to L2 because the slopes are equal. I want to see how you found the slopes. I want to see that you show that they're the same. Got it? Let's try one more example. I know you were going to ask that. Let's look at these two lines. Let's look at 0, 2, -4, -4. And let's look at 5, 3, 2, negative 3. This is line 1, this is line 2. We're going to find the slope of the first one. Slope of line 1, take the y values, negative 4 minus 2. Second one, negative 4 minus 0. There's our y values and our x values. On top we'll get negative 6. On bottom we'll get negative 4. And this gives us 3 over 2 when we simplify. Some people have trouble with fractions. The biggest thing is that you find out the simplest terms so you know if they're the same. Remember, 5 out of 4 people have trouble with fractions. Let's find the slope of the second line. This is going to be 3 minus a negative 3 on top. 5 minus 2 on bottom. So this will be 6 over 3, which will give us 2 over 1. Are these two the same slope? They are not. That means that you would say line 1 here is not parallel to line 2. So let's go back. Let's go back. The first example, we showed the slopes were the same. The second example, we showed the slopes were not the same. Slopes the same, lines parallel. Slopes not the same, lines not parallel. If you need to go back a little, say, hey, let's take a look at that example again, and the sub will go back. Let's do a different example. Let's say I want to find the equation of a line parallel to the given line through the given point. So let me show you. We're going to start with the first example. It's going to have the equation of the line is 1/3 x. That is the equation of the line. And I want to find a line parallel to this, but I want it to go through the point 6, 0. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, well, what is my slope of this line? We'll look at it as y equals mx plus b. So you would have the slope here is equal to 1/3. Lines that are parallel have the same slope. So the parallel slope has to be the same, 1/3. I want it to go through this point, so let's set it up as an equation. Y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. Plug in my slope and my point, so I get y minus 0 equals 1/3 x minus 6. Let's simplify that. I get y equals, because it's y minus 0 is just y, 1/3 times x minus 2. If it wants you to leave it in point slope form, you could leave it like this. If it says to leave in y-intercept form, write it like this. This is a negative 2 because it's 6 times 1/3. That's 6 over 3, which is 2. Good. Don't make this hard, guys. It really isn't. Make sure you get these examples. Some of them will be very similar to the ones in your notes or your assignment. Let's do one more. Just like this. I'll give you a second to copy a little bit more in case you were slowing down. I do hope you guys are doing all right. Please remember to make sure you treat the sub well. I'll be back before you know it. Let's say our equation is y equals, for my next example, y equals 1/2 x plus 2. I want to draw the parallel line through this, or through this point here, which is -2, 4. So I'm drawing a line parallel to this, the equation, through that point. What's the slope of this? Well, the slope is here. It's 1/2. So the parallel slope is also 1/2. Don't worry about any of the other stuff. The slope is what's in front of the x. That's what you got to worry about. So when we write our equation, we're going to say y minus y1 equals 1/2 times x minus x1. I'll have y minus a -2 equals, wait, what? Oh, that's the x value, not the y value. Make sure you're using the right point. Y minus 4, thank you for pointing that out, is equal to 1/2 the x minus the -2 in parentheses. My next step would then be to make this y minus 4 equals 1/2 x plus -2 times this. It's going to give me just 1. If I want it in point slope form or point intercept form, I'm going to want to change it. So I would say then y equals 1/2 x plus 5. This is slope intercept. This is point slope. Make sure that you've got whichever one the book wants. Hey, if you want to have fun, do both. So that's parallel lines. I know what you're saying. You're saying, but Mr. Berzins, we said we were going to do parallel and perpendicular. Don't worry. So let's say I want to do perpendicular lines. Well, fact. 2 non-vertical lines are perpendicular if and only if the product of their slopes is -1. What does product mean? Product means multiplication. So if you multiply the slopes, you get a -1, the lines are perpendicular. Once again, multiply the slopes, if you get -1, the lines are going to be perpendicular. Now you may say again, what about the vertical? Well, fact, a vertical and horizontal line are perpendicular. Just remember, parallel, same slope. Perpendicular, multiply, get -1. Let's take a quick look at how we do this. First, I want to start off with an example saying, find the perpendicular slope. Okay, so let's say I gave you a slope, line 1 had a slope of 1/2. Well, then the perpendicular slope would have to be what multiplies by this to get you -1, which would just be -2/1. Because this times this give me -1. Those are perpendicular slopes. They will form perpendicular lines. What if my line had a slope of 3? Then the perpendicular slope, I'd have to multiply by 3 to get -1, would be equal to -1/3. because they have to multiply to give you -1. What if I had a slope of 2/5? Then the perpendicular slope would have to be equal to 5/2. Because this times that would give you -1. Wait, what? Wait a second. 2/5 and 5/2 equal 1. I would have to have a negative slope here. So it would have to be -5/2 to get me -1. Just be careful. It's not difficult, but just be careful. Let's look at an example of what you're going to be doing in your assignment. Again, multiply to give you -1. You know, one that always seems to trick people, and I don't really know why, but let's say my slope of my first line was equal to 1. What would the perpendicular slope be? What times 1 gives me -1? Anyone? Anyone? Excellent. The perpendicular slope would be equal to -1, because these two multiply to give me -1. Don't make this hard. Let's do another type of example where we actually have a picture. So here's our two lines, and I've got a point here at 0, -2. I've got a point here at 4, -4. I've got a point here at 4, 1. And I've got a point here at 1, -5. And I want to see if these lines are perpendicular. Okay. Well, let's find the slopes. Let's call this line 1, and let's call this line 2. So the slope of line 1 is equal to -2 minus -4 over 0 minus 4, which will give us plus positive 2 over -4, or -1/2. The slope of line 2 is going to be equal to 1 minus -5 over 4 minus 1, which will give us 6 over 3, which will be 2 over 1. When you multiply these, do you get -1? -1/2 times 2 over 1. Remember, 5 out of 4 people have trouble with fractions. You do, you get -1. So you would say that line 1 is perpendicular to line 2. This is the work I need to see when you have a question like this. And that's what I'm going to look at when I grade these papers. Did you show the work? Did you make corrections when you went over it in class? Let's do one more type of question like this just to make sure you know, because some of these will be very similar to your homework. I want to start with a write a line perpendicular through the point that's given, in this case point P. So here's my equation, y equal to 1/2 x minus 4, and the point is at 2, 0. What's my slope here? My slope is going to be 1/2. So my perpendicular slope is going to be -2 over 1, or -2. If it makes you feel better, write it like that. I'm going to plug into my point slope equation, and I'll have y minus y1 equals -2 over 1 times x minus x1, which will be y minus 0 equals -2 times x minus 2, which will give me y equals -2x plus 4. There's my final equation in slope-intercept form. It's going to be in point-slope form. You can leave it like this, but I think the book wants you to change it to slope-intercept form. Now, I know what you're saying, that can't be all we have today. I'm sorry, it is. For your chapter 3 review, I believe one of the other teachers will be coming in and going over that with you. But for tonight, this is the assignment I want you to work on. And please remember to work quietly and do a good job. You'll do page 201, 7 to 14, and 15 to 21. Don't forget, I want you to go from 7 to 14, stop, then go to 15 and go to 21. Make sure you show your work. I'll see you as soon as I can.